order to really understand the digestive function over the course of the year, we have to look at the seasonal patterns. This is such a core fundamental idea, which is also misunderstood too nowadays. Usually what you see in books is eating for a dosha type, which is not there in the classical text. Unless you're really out of balance or have something, some specific therapeutic aims you're working with, you're not going to try to balance your dosha through your diet. And even if you do, you're going to have to temper that by many, many different factors, So you might see a list where a certain food isn't good for pitta, quote unquote, but depending on how you cook it and how you prepare it, it can completely change the qualities of the food to make it totally okay for pitta. So basically, food lists like that are really just kind of general learning tools to get a basic idea, but to actually implement and use Ayurveda within that context can throw you out of balance. What's really ideal is to eat seasonable foods for your local area, which is can take a lot of research, but also understanding the seasonal shifts too, which are not as simple either as just this season is pitta, this season is vata, this season is kapha. There's a lot of details there, which I'm not going to talk about here. I'll talk about the basic patterns, but we do have some information up for those of you who are interested in that. But first of all, we really need to recognize how our digestion is affected by the patterns of the sun. This is really the most fundamental, it's the cause of the seasons. It's what, this differential heating on the earth is what causes the winds to move, is causes, the rains to form and the rains to release, is really the movement of the sun. And that's where you have to start with your seasonal understanding and what I'm going to stick to here, because we're just looking at basic fundamentals. Anything past that gets pretty specific to, geographical location, time of the year, personal imbalance. There's a lot of different factors that get into, but the most basic thing to understand here is the northern and southern paths of the sun. So basically in the wintertime, the sun is at its lowest point in the sky during the winter solstice. And it's really at this time that the digestion is at its strongest. And it's also correspondingly, this is a time when we can really eat our heaviest diets in both quality as well as quantity. And now this isn't meant to, abuse our system like we do for the holidays, but it is nice that during the holidays, digestion can handle some of the heavier food we might eat. But it's basically, this is the time, and that likely has its roots in traditions, deep-rooted traditions where, yes, that was a time to eat a lot of food, because that's basically the time when our body builds up the bulk of the earth and water elements, and it's really the main nutritive time for our body. So basically, if we don't gain a lot of the nutrients and protein and heavier items that we need for health at this time, if we don't get our mass at this time, it can be pretty difficult to do that at a later time when the digestive function is not functioning as optimally. So basically, as the sun starts to climb higher and higher in the sky, the digestion starts to decrease. Over time, the weather starts getting warmer, and this taxes our body more and more. We're spending more energy to keep the heat out of our body, so the heat leaves the digestive tract, so there's not as much fire, so to speak, in the digestive tract. And this reaches its ultimate peak there during the summer solstice, when the sun's at its highest place in the sky. And it's at this time that the bodies are considered to be at their weakest. So the classical texts say that vata is aggravated in the summer, not pitta. And we should be eating our lightest diets at this time, which consists mainly of sweet foods and, having easy access to carbohydrates, so like fruits, or easy to digest basmati rice, so something that's not so taxing on the system. But it's also a time to lay low on physical activity and, not engage in a rigorous asana routine or take a bunch of workshops or this or that. It's time to take it easy in the summer, really. Sit under a shaded tree and, drink something cool. That's the ideal. Now, from there, the body slowly starts to regain after the summer solstice. That digestive capacity slowly starts to regain itself until, that middle of winter when it's at its highest. And so that whole phase is considered a time that's dominated by the moon. So once again, you see this, solar lunar structure being implemented across these two different disciplines. And that's also a time, when and we can build our whatever strength we lost in the summer, we can build it back up during these cooler seasons. And there's many, many, many more details to those shifts that have to be adjusted for, as I mentioned. But that's really the basic season pattern to start to pay attention to how it affects your digestion. So the main point you should be getting here is that you really shouldn't be eating the same way or the same things year round. And you shouldn't be engaging in the same type of physical yogic practice or the same types of exercise regimes all year round. You really need to monitor what's going on in your body instead of just doing things on autopilot. Unless what you're doing with your practices is mild, some types of imbalances are probably going to accrue slowly over time if you're not living with these dynamic changes. Because we often have this idea that, okay, working out's healthy for me, I'm going to just work out every single day all year round, and that you have to adjust to these things somehow, or else you slowly over time. It doesn't come in a year or two quite often, especially if you do have a more kapha in you, or you do eat a heavier diet and you can handle it more. It's not going to affect you, but slowly over time, living out of phase with these shifts is gonna create disease in your organism until one day, like bam, you have something chronic that you didn't know and it just got exposed. And it's at that point when Western medicine steps in. These are just basics. But life is dynamic. All this information is dynamic. It's a big flow. It's not do this all the time. It's not a list. It's really getting in touch with all these currents. That is what we have to start to wake up to. And so that's the basics on the seasonal shifts. And the last thing as far as health regimes I want to talk about is cleansing.